Hey friends, welcome back to the Fierce Calling podcast. You are listening to episode 211. I'm talking with guests who are taking action where their passion, compassion, and conviction intersect. That is their fierce calling. And the heart of the show is to inspire, encourage, and challenge women to take action where their passion, compassion, and conviction intersect. This week, I'm welcoming my friend Kate Battistelli. She is the author of several books, and we're going to talk about those books. And she's also a speaker, a wife, mom to the award-winning Christian artist Francesca Battistelli, and a grandma and a host of an amazing podcast. And Kate shares her powerful story about stepping from a career in theater in the New York Broadway scene opposite a well-known actor you're going to possibly know, depending on how old you are. You might know him, you might not know him. But she stepped out of that whole deal, just stepped away and stepped into an unexpected life of faith, family, and purpose after coming to know Christ. And you're going to love her salvation story. It's actually her and her husband's salvation story. It is so sweet. And she's going to also share a lot of practical tips for navigating life's transitions, building strong marriages, and mentoring the next generation, and basically saying yes to unexpected adventures. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I loved having Kate on the show, and I know what she shares is going to encourage, inspire, and challenge you. So listen in while I have a chat with Kate Battistelli. What is threatening to steal your joy? What is it that feels so heavy right now that you could barely stand? God has a plan, and his plan is to surrender it. Surrender it to him. It might be a prodigal. It might be a relationship, a marriage, something with your job. So many things. We have so many amazing blessings, but there are so many things in our life that threaten to steal our joy. I'm Doris Swift, author of the award-winning 6-week Bible study, Surrender the Joy Stealers, Rediscover the Jesus Joy in You. And it helps women rediscover the overflowing, ever-present Jesus joy within that fills, empowers, and ripens the fruit that God produces in our lives. Using personal and biblical stories, I share how you can identify your joy stealers, surrender them to God, reawaken the joy within, and share the joy with others. You can do it on your own or with a group. Check it out, friends. Surrender the Joy Stealers. Rediscover the Jesus joy in you. It's available on all the online retailers. It's time to take your joy back. Welcome back to the show. Today, I am so excited to introduce to you my friend, Kate Battistelli. I've been looking forward to this interview with her. She is the author of The After Party of the Empty Nest. Mom is not your only name. Amen. And she's also the author of the bestseller, The God Dare, Will You Choose to Believe the Impossible? And Growing Great Kids, Partner with God to Cultivate His Purpose in Your Child's Life. And she is a contributing writer to a lot of different publications. And she's also 1/3 of the popular Mom to Mom podcast. So you listen to podcasts, so be sure to check that out. And she's also a former actress, so we're going to hear a little bit about that. It's kind of exciting. She currently lives in Franklin, Tennessee, and she is near her daughter, who you probably know. She's the contemporary Christian recording artist Francesca Battistelli, and she has 7 precious grandchildren. So this is very exciting and a good reason to move to Tennessee. And I love this about Kate, that she serves women by encouraging them to step out of their safe space and into his irresistible future. I've never heard it put that way, so I'm really intrigued, and I love that so much. Kate, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doris. I am thrilled to be here.
I am so excited about this because we are going to talk about so many amazing things that are really going to bless the audience, the listener today. So listener, stay tuned to the end because Kate has something exciting that she wants to offer you. So we don't want to miss out on that. And we are talking about the new book, but there's so many things really that are kind of intertwined in your story, Kate, and from your background and everything that's So fascinating. And I just can't wait for you to share that. So I would love if you would share a little about your story, however the Lord leads you, and how you are taking action where your passion, compassion, and conviction intersect.
Yeah, I mean, my story is so quirky. I always tell people, God has a sense of humor because he took me from not knowing him to finding him at 29. So I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I grew up going to church, but there was never any desire to know Jesus. And it was never really talked about. So I left home. I went to 4 colleges in 2 years. I didn't graduate from any of them. So I like to remind people I'm a college dropout, but that doesn't matter. You can still do lots of stuff. But I did get on the dean's list, so there's that. And my husband has a doctorate, so combined kind of, works in my
Right.
favor. But yeah, just had an interesting life. Now I'm married. We've been married 42 years this summer. We have 7 grandkids, just one child. I wanted a big family. God gave us one, but she's got 7, and it's such a blessing. You don't think about what that'll be like till you have them. My husband always says, you don't think your heart can grow bigger, but it really can. And with each one, it just grows a little bit more. So if you're blessed to have grandchildren, it's a wonderful thing. And we
Yeah.
feel just honored.
That's beautiful. And having, because you talk about in the book too, how Francesca was the only child and, all of that. But she's given you 7 is a pretty amazing number of grandkids to have. And it's like a good number. It's like a God number. I
It
mean, maybe
is.
she'll have
It
more, but
really is. She
if she has
might,
12, that's a God number too.
that's true. So
She's,
is 8. They're
yeah.
all God numbers. Just some are, you don't want 13, but
Yeah,
no,
right.
let's see.
But that's so fun and fantastic. And I know that you have a lot of background in theater and that kind of thing. So you have a lot of talent in your family and how this all came about, because I think your husband was involved in Broadway as well. So if you could tell us a little bit about that and share how that went and how God segued you out of that particular season in your life.
Sure. It's a crazy story. And it to me, it's a really prophetic picture of what God was doing even before I knew him. And I'll come back to that. But yeah, I was a young actress in New York just wanting to be famous. I wanted fame and fortune. I'd lived in New Jersey like you had, and New York was not that far. So eventually I made my way there in my 20s. And I was doing different things, children's theater, regional theater, whatever I could do, I would say yes to. Well, one day I got a call from my agent, and he says, Kate, there's a big production of The King and I starring Yul Brynner that's going to be a national tour. And if some of your audience, they may be too young, they're like, who? Well,
The
he was a
bald guy.
huge star. I know. If you've ever seen the 10 Commandments, he played Pharaoh.
Mm.
And he was back in 1981, he was still a huge star. So he was starring in it, and my agent wanted me to audition for the understudy to the leading lady. And I thought, okay, well, I ended up getting the part. I thought, well, this is great. I'm going to travel. I'm going to actually earn some money. I'll never go on, because understudies basically are like an insurance policy for the producer.
Mm.
So, especially at that level, and I was young, I had experience, but I didn't have that kind of experience. I was young to be picked for an understudy, but I think I was thrilled. But I learned my part. You have to know your part backward and forward. So I knew if ever called on, I'll be able to do this, thinking I'm never going to get a chance. Well, about 2 months into the run of the show, I walk into the theater one night, and as soon as my foot crosses the threshold, the stage manager runs to me. He grabs me and he says, "She's sick, you're on." And I mean, your life flashes before your eyes. Because I don't know if people realize The King and I has probably the biggest role for a female in all of musical theater. It's a 3-hour show,
Mm.
and I sang 7 songs. I'm on stage almost the whole time. I mean, it's just a huge show. So the thought of, and I got in at 7:15 for an 8 o'clock show because I didn't have much to do in the chorus. It didn't take much to get ready. But for that, the hoop skirts, the hats. I'd never handled the props. I'd never worn the costumes. I'd never done a scene with Yul Brynner. So the thought of all of it was terrifying. But as I'm standing in the wings about to go on, the thought occurred to me, and I told this to my daughter many times. I said, sometimes you just have to do it afraid. there are those times in life where you can't back up. It's like having a baby. You can't, when it starts, you can't get out of it. And
Yeah.
this was that same thing. This is what I was getting paid for. Well, I did the show. I didn't die because I thought I might, but I didn't. Ended up going on for the leading lady for 2 weeks because she had pneumonia. But she got well, came back to the show. I went back to the chorus because that's how it works. And I thought that was great, great credit for my resume, but that's not the end of the story. The crazy part is about a month later, I get a call from one of the producers. And he says, Kate, Mr. Brenner has sent the leading lady back to New York. He's paid off her 2-year contract and he wants you in the role.
Wow.
I mean, that never happens. They're not going to put an understudy in a leading role like that. They're always going to bring in somebody from New York, but I really look at it as a God thing, the way he will reach down and pull you out of obscurity to dance with him. Because if you know The King and I, toward the end, there's that big shall we dance scene, which I get chills just talking about it. It was just an amazing thing to be a part of. I ended up doing the show almost 3 years, about 1,000 performances.
Wow.
So all over the place. But the best part is this cute guy joined the tour named Mike Battistelli. He was the associate conductor, and we've always played gigantic theater. So you could see the orchestra, and I could see who's that cute guy. He joined as the associate conductor, so he had to learn the score. So he's flipping the pages, and I'm seeing him and thinking, he's really cute. I got to get the scoop on him. So a couple of my friends, I sent him, find out, what's the deal with him, find out if he's married, whatever. Well, he wasn't. We literally fell in love across the footlights because I could see him. He could see me. He said, when I first saw you, I thought you were a much older British actress. But then I found out you were, a girl from New Jersey with a good English accent. So he will still tell that story. But we met, we fell in love. When I left the show in 1983, we ended up getting married in July. And well, if you want, I'll tell you our salvation story because it's just as crazy
Oh,
as this
yeah.
whole thing.
Let's hear
Okay.
it.
Well, we had a little side business because we were both then unemployed. And we started this business, and there was an older woman that was mentoring us. She was just helping us figure it out. Well, if we found out she was a born again Jewish woman, a Messianic Jew. And she was a typical New Yorker. She was relentless. She kept inviting us to church, and she would not stop inviting us. And we kept saying, no, we're good. We don't need to go to church, was our thought. But she kept inviting us. So Mike and I just looked at each other one day and said, if she invites us one more time, let's just get this over with. Because eventually it's rude to say no one more time. You kind of have to say yes. So I always tell people, don't stop inviting. They eventually have to say yes. So, but she invites us to church. And New York, we get on the F train, the last stop in the F train in Jamaica, Queens. And we lived in the Village. So this is a long subway ride. And we're like thinking, oh, Lord, what have we gotten ourselves into? Well, we get out of the subway, and the church was about 2 blocks away. And the church was in a big old movie theater. So we're walking to the church, and you could almost sense the building pulsating, like something was going on. Now, they were having a big gospel choir that night, so that was part of it. But also the Holy Spirit. When you don't know what the Holy Spirit or who he is, it's very intimidating. But we walk into this church, we find out it's an all-black Holiness church, which, if that's the men sit on one side, the women on the other. The women wear dresses. They don't wear makeup. They don't wear jewelry. It's a very strict sect, I guess, of Christianity. I don't know, well, denomination. Wonderful people, but just different. I mean, I was raised Episcopalian. I didn't know any of this. And the other thing is, in the lobby, there are crutches hanging on the wall of people that have been healed, empty wheelchairs. We're thinking, what farm planet did we just get dropped on? Because we just had no experience with this. Well, she seats us in the front row. We're the only 3 white faces in an all-black church. Mike's sitting on one side because the men and women are separated. Our friend June and I were on the other side. And the pastor just gave this fiery salvation message because I'm pretty sure she said to him, they need to get saved. So, put it all on because they need salvation. Well, at the end, with his altar call, Mike's hand went up on his side, mine went up. We didn't know each other were saying yes to Jesus. We went forward, gave our hearts to the Lord, and that was it. We've never turned back from that. But we were still living in New York, still that was March 31st, 1984. A year after that, we had our daughter, Francesca. And a year after that, we're still living in New York. Mike's conducting on Broadway and Radio City. I'm just doing all kinds of different off-Broadway things. And we start getting this sense, both of us, that something's not right here. And we knew the Lord was saying to us, this is not the life that I've planned for you. I want you to lay this down. Kind of like Abraham, walk away from everything, go to a land that I'll show you. I won't tell you. And we didn't know what to do. We ended up moving back to New Jersey for a while, had our home business, started homeschooling way before it was cool, way before it's the thing everybody
You
does.
made it cool.
Before there were computers. It was really fun to not have computers. But yeah, I mean, it was just crazy. And we ended up down in Florida when Franny was about 7, but it was just such a interesting twist and turn. I like to call it 90-degree turns. You're going one way with the Lord, and then he says, no, I want you to go this completely different way that you were never expecting. And he'll do that. But if we're open to hearing his voice, and if we decide to say yes, because we could have said no, we could have stayed in New York and, could have gotten my Tony maybe, I don't know, but I don't look back with any regret. I would not go back to that for a million years, but it was a crazy season.
Yeah. Wow, that's a powerful story. And talking about when you arrived at this church and it was just so far out of your comfort zone, with what you were seeing, and it's like, what is this about? Hello. But thank you so much for the encouragement of saying, don't give up asking, because I know sometimes, I mean, we all have been guilty of, we just give up too soon. Like, never mind, they're not going to do that, or we just don't really consider what God can do. And, like if we keep going with what he leads us to do and not to give up, and so I love that.
Definitely.
That's great. So I love that. And how you both were called or feeling that almost like conviction.
Yeah,
to make
it was
a change.
Conviction. We're just both sensing it at the same time. We both knew. And it was hard. People think you're crazy when you've reached a certain level. My husband has a doctorate. Like I said, he worked his whole life to get to where he got. And then God says, walk away. And you're just like, all right. But obedience always has, it always has good at the end. If you're going to obey, there's a price to obey, but there's also a reward. That's what I found.
Yes. Well, that's really encouraging for someone to hear, because, there might be someone listening right now who's kind of struggling with a decision and they feel like, do I just give this all up? And what would that look like? And I think it kind of segues. I love your story that you share. I'm pretty sure it's in the newest book, when you share the story about how you really were never planning to be an author. And then,
no, never.
And then the first book kind of came out of nowhere when you were going to speak, I think, with your husband, right? So,
yeah. God dared me to write that book. He really, literally dared me. And I had no interest. I knew I could write. Like, I knew I was a good writer, but the thought of being an author, I thought, no, God, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But you know how God is. He can make you do what you don't want to do. So for me, that's what I call it. My second book was called The God Dare, because of the way I see it all through Scripture, how all these different Bible heroes take these amazing steps with the Lord. It's God's call on them, but I call it a God dare, because they could say no, but because they did it, they changed the world. And it's just all through Scripture. And that's what he did to us. I mean, it seems crazy, but it felt like that, but he's just daring you to go a completely different direction. It's like, okay, Lord, this is you, not me.
Yeah. And so absolutely true that, we can't say no. And what if we said no? And then we look back and go, wow, I'm glad I didn't say no to God.
I know. Well, we can choose to be chosen. We can choose to be chosen to change the world, or we can say no, and God will find somebody else. Do you know who Reinhard Bonnke was? Do you remember who he was?
Yes.
He was like the Billy Graham of Africa. Huge ministry. Millions came into the kingdom. Well, when he was at the height of his ministry, God told him, he said, you were not my first choice. You were my third choice. So imagine how humbling that is, but imagine those two other guys.
Mm-hmm.
They get to heaven and God says, "Look what you turned down." And that strikes terror into my heart. I'm like, God, I didn't meet you till I was 29, so I've already missed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to miss anything else. I don't want to go to heaven and see there's all these blank pages. This was yours. And I think
Yeah.
for so many of us, fear will stop us, comfort zone. So if anybody's listening that's struggling, just pray, ask the Lord for confirmation. He will show you. Get some Christians that that have a strong walk with the Lord to pray for you, because it
Mm-hmm.
may well be God saying, step into something crazy, step into something scary, because it
Yeah.
usually is.
Yeah.
Writing a book is scary. It's not easy. You're putting yourself out there hoping somebody's going to actually read it and get something from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely is. And it's just kind of reminder of this is God, this is your calling, and I'm not going to make it about me, like, well,
Yeah.
what if I fail, or what if this isn't good, or I don't sell enough copies, or, and so just like you were saying earlier, the obedience is
Yeah.
the important step to take, and step out in faith and obedience, and then he does the rest. But I also love how you brought out that point, which was really golden, about how if we're not going to say yes to something, someone else will. And
Yeah.
sometimes we're that someone else. We might be the third
Mm-hmm.
person God is called
Yeah.
to do something. And so we don't have to like take offense for third place. It's just like, that's what we
Yeah.
were supposed to do. And I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. That's really cool. And just talking
Yeah.
about your book, because so many women can relate to all your books, actually. And I love the God Dare, because we all can relate to that for sure. And you were talking about that after party, because I know you kind of think about on Broadway, right? When the
Mm-hmm.
show's over, is that kind of,
Yeah.
I heard you talk about
Yeah,
that.
there's an after party, and it's a time for everybody to get together, kind of look at what they did, realize it was good,
Mm-hmm.
congratulate themselves, but then, okay, what's the next audition? What's the next thing I'm going to do? But it's a good time to examine what you did and to look back in pride. And I find that's the same with motherhood. It's an after party is a good time. It's not, you're not sitting there dissecting everything and what was wrong and how terrible it is. It's a joyful time.
Mm-hmm.
And so many women get to the empty nest and they're just miserable. They're just
Right.
stuck in that. I don't know who I am. I don't know what to do with my life, which is nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But God is laying out a whole new future for you.
Yeah.
Raising kids was a season, amazing, important. You change the world in that as you raise your children. But once they're gone, what are you going to do with the next 40, 50, 60 years? We
Mm-hmm.
have to think that way.
Yeah.
What's that thing? We're not going to sit in bed and watch Netflix and eat Cheetos. There's a purpose for us.
Yeah.
We're put on this planet for a reason, especially think about that you were saved till now.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we're in the end times.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that God could have put us on this planet anytime in the last however many 6,000 years, he chose the end. He saved us till now. When you think about that, that's pretty mind blowing
It is.
that he has us here because of what he wants us to do. Each of us has an assignment to build the kingdom, but we have to say yes, like with Reinhard Bonnke, somebody has to say yes. And if you look at it that way and ask the Lord, what is my place in this?
Mm-hmm.
What in the grand scheme of this, of salvation and of getting as many people in the boat as we can, what's my part? It can be huge. There is no huge, big or small, I don't think,
Mm-hmm.
in the kingdom. I think it's just a matter of obedience. You either are obeying or you're not,
Yeah.
you know,
So
that,
true.
that, it to me. Yeah.
And I like how you were talking about how to be prepared, for like when I
Yes.
liken that to, okay, like when you walked in to that stage door that day and it's like, you're on, Kate, this is it. And, but you were prepared for it ahead of time. It's not like you didn't know the lines, or you hadn't been
Right.
practicing. You were diligent in doing that and said yes to that role. But then I also love how you just then brought out the fact that thinking about empty nest is not just for the woman who's already there at the empty nest
Right.
season.
Right.
We can prepare ahead. And I know you talk about that in your book too, the things that women can do now, maybe young moms even can do now, and just have that mindset that we are raising our children to follow Jesus and discipling them. So if you could share a little bit about that, because I think that's encouraging.
Yeah, we have to remember we're raising them to go. That's the whole point. And every day they're getting a little bit closer to that. But if you've still got kids at home and you know this is looming, maybe in the next couple of years, now's the time to start thinking about it. And that was my mistake. It just never occurred to me because since she was an only child, we were very involved in helping navigate the whole Nashville music, all that stuff until she finally left home, just to kind of help her pave the way. And whatever was happening, we wanted to be part of it just to protect her. But once she was gone, then it really hit me like a ton of bricks. And I just thought, what do I do now? Because that was a stay-at-home mom. And the thought of now I've got all this time to fill, which actually is a wonderful thing. But at the time, it just felt like this weight on me, and it was really hard. So what I did, I started volunteering, which really helped. And I always recommend women to do that. But if you've still got kids at home, you're not quite at that point. Start thinking about it, start praying about it, start preparing for it. If you know what you're going to do, if you know, like I know the Lord's told me to say, open a business or go back to college, what can you start doing now to start preparing for that? If he's calling you to go back to college, well, can you take one class a year, or one semester at a time? You don't have to do the whole thing, but how much closer you'll be to your goal. Or if you want to start a business, well, go work for somebody that has a small business, or go online and see what all is involved, because there's a lot. If you're going to have a business, there's a lot to that. Or maybe you want to go into politics. I mean, there's a million things, or write a book, whatever that is. Start praying. More than anything is pray to know that you're on the right track, but also start using the resources. I mean, we didn't have YouTube when I was growing up, but there was no Facebook. When she was, I think Franny was 18 when Facebook came out. So for me to do any of this writing or anything, there were really no resources, but now there's so many. So if you're a woman with kids still at home, or they're going this fall or whatever, and it's just looming and terrifying you, don't let it terrify you. It's a really great season. The best thing, even though the kids are gone and you're looking across that dinner table and they're not there's all this freedom. All of a sudden, you actually do have freedom to do the stuff you want. Maybe you'd like more than 20 minutes of Bible study in the morning. You can spend 2 hours.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's so much more you can do. You can go out to lunch with friends or go out to dinner with your husband. We took our grandkids recently to Chick-fil-A. It was $100, more than 100, to take these kids for lunch. And I thought, man, if you're a mom that finally they're gone, there's some extra cash. You and your husband can have a nice dinner. And that's another thing. Keep pouring into your marriage now. Don't let things get to where the kids are gone and you're looking at each other going, I don't even know you. There's this very sad phenomenon called gray divorce. I don't know if your listeners have heard of that, but it's becoming more and more common, even among Christian couples, that the kids go, they have nothing in common anymore, and they get divorced. So I talk a lot about maintaining that intimacy with your husband, because we know God is first, but he's next. He comes before the kids, which is hard when they're really little. I mean, you're 24/7 when they're little, but still there's a way to have a date night, do something where you can maintain that relationship, because it's not hard for couples to split up, because the kids are that buffer, and if there were issues simmering under the surface, it's easy to kind of just push them to the side. But once the kids are gone, you're looking at each other, and it's become a real problem. So spend that time now to make that a priority.
Yeah, great advice. And yeah, because you don't want to look at each other after the kids are gone and go, I don't even know who you are. Who are
And
you?
I don't even know if I still like you,
Yeah.
and you may not.
Yeah.
But you have to plan. It's like you don't plan for retirement when you're retired,
Right.
right? You plan years before. Well, same with your marriage, especially if you've got younger ones. Just do what you can to pour into it. I have like 20 date night ideas in the book, just to make people, give them an idea that this is not as hard as you think. Doesn't have to be going out and spending $100 on a meal. There's ton of other things you can do to just maintain that closeness, because he's going to be there when the kids and the Legos and the mess is gone,
Mhm.
so that's probably one of the most important things to do before your nest is empty.
Yeah. Wow. That is so good. And I love in the book how you do share those things. And
Yeah.
for people, because sometimes they're like, I don't know what to do, and so they can just get your book and then they'll know. And so I love that. And how in the book, too, that you share different stories from different women and,
Yeah.
their experiences and how you broke down that you have these like types of moms based on these three bird.
Birds.
Yes. Could you share a little bit about that? That was so fun.
Sure. Oh, sure. Well, you're thinking nest, it kind of makes birds make sense. Well, I see it as three types of mama birds. There's the swallow, who's the one that's kind of looking forward to the empty nest. Not everybody is sad and scared about. There's some that,
Mm-hmm.
look, I know where I'm going when you kids are gone. Love you, but bye. I mean, they may still have some sad, and
Right.
mourning and stuff, but they're ready to go. And then there's the mourning dove. And we know, they're sad little coos that they make, and they just sound so sad. And that's the mom who just kind of gets stuck. She's in that and she can't really see a purpose other than being mom. And once that purpose is gone, she's very sad and confused and can sit in that for a while. And then there's the robin mom. It's kind of a combo of both. She wants to move on, but she's also kind of stuck, and that's what I was. I was more that combo mom that saw that, yeah, there has to be more, but this is really hard. We can get
Mm-hmm.
into self-pity. We can just get stuck there. I've talked to a mom recently who's, it's been 3 years since my kids left. I'm like, 3 years? You need to get on this. It's time to move out of that because there is so much more. And I think a lot of women think that was it. Being a mom, that was my call, my purpose. I have nothing now unless they have kids and I'm a grandma. That is not true.
Yeah.
God has ordained something for you from before the foundation of the world.
Yeah.
And that it's up to us to find out what that is through prayer, through getting other people to pray, through step out. That's why I say step out and volunteer. Because if nothing else, you may find your calling in that. And if nothing else, find a younger mom you can mentor because you
Mm.
know more than she does, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've been through it. You can help her. And there's tons of younger moms. They're going to Instagram for their information,
Yeah.
for their mothering tips. And you're not going to get it on Instagram or a podcast of all young moms. They need the older voices, to the tightest two women, to
Mm-hmm.
speak into them and say, you can get through it. Let me help you. Here's what I can do, and here's how I can advise you. We really need that. So if nothing else, at least do that. I think
Yes.
that'll help a lot of other women,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I love it. It is so biblical, for the Titus
Sure.
2 woman to mentor other women and young women. And we can learn a lot from each other too, but
Very
also,
much.
sharing what we know with them because there are many young women out there who have not had a mother figure in their life, that has
Yeah.
been,
Many.
and so they need a mother figure that is a follower of Jesus, that is a
Right.
believer and
Yeah.
looks at things through a biblical perspective and a godly
Mhm.
lens and can impart those beautiful things on to whatever it is they share, with them. And mentorship is so
Yeah.
precious. So, and
Very much
yeah.
so.
And
Yeah.
of course, we have your beautiful daughter. She is talented and she is serving the Lord in her song and with all that she does, and that is really a blessing to
Yeah.
see that come to pass, when your child. And
Yeah.
but you talk about prodigals in your book too,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of
Yeah.
moms who are struggling because their child has walked away from the faith, but to just keep encouraging them in that. And so I love how you
Yeah,
talk
and I
about
mean,
that.
really the only answer to that is prayer
Mm-hmm.
and intercession,
Mm-hmm.
because I like to remind them that Jesus leaves the 99 and he goes for the one.
Mm-hmm.
And your child is the one. And there are lots of kids that have walked away from the church because this world just sucks them in,
Mm-hmm.
all the crazy in this world, but he knows better than you do. He
Yeah.
loves them more than you do. and he's going after him, but just pray, pray, pray. And if there's any communication, keep that open. Sometimes there's not.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes kids just cut their parents off. But the prodigal son did come back.
Mm-hmm.
He got to that point where he realized this is not working, and pray that. The one thing I always pray, because I have family members, most of them are not saved, but I pray, Lord, send an ambassador into their lives that they'll listen to, because they're not going to listen to me,
Mm-hmm.
but they're going to listen to somebody else. And that's a powerful thing. I think if you're a mom of prodigal, pray for that person to just come in and hit them with the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
That can help.
Amen. Yeah, and we were talking earlier about how saying yes to whatever God is calling us to do, our yes might be an answer to somebody's prayer, some mom's prayer for their child who
Yeah.
needs to hear, a truth from someone, like you say, outside the family that
Yeah.
they'll be open to listen to. And, sometimes we're the water, sometimes we plant the seeds,
Yeah.
but that's the beauty of all of that. And
Right.
yeah, so that is so encouraging for a mom that's listening right now. And even if you're not a mom listening right now, there might be someone in your family who you have a burden for because they're lost, and just to surrender that, surrender it to God and just trust him. And like you said, prayer, which is why too, I love in your book how at the end of each chapter, which I also love, your chapters aren't hugely long, so
No,
that
I try to keep it short.
yeah, so it's great, and you can get through it. And then at the end, you have the discussion questions, and then you go into like scripture verses that are encouraging for
Hmm.
applicable for that, and then you have prayer. So
Yeah.
sometimes we need a little help with the prompt, with the prayer.
Hmm.
So that
Yeah.
is so important. And yeah, so this has been so amazing. And I was just going to ask, if is there anything else that you feel led to share to someone who's listening today? Because I know, like, really, when we can think about you and I in different seasons, even like I was a banker for
Yeah.
29 years, and I didn't even start doing podcasting or writing books and speaking and all that until
Yeah.
after I was 50. I went back to school at 55,
Yeah.
graduated at 59.
For you.
So yeah, so it's like you're not done. So like you said, don't
No.
don't like just sit in the grandma waiting room, like
Uh-uh. Because you may not be a grandma. Your kids may
right.
not they may not get married. And if
Mhm.
you're waiting for that, don't fall into that trap.
Yeah.
But I think, I tell women all the time, if you told me 15 years ago, Kate, in 15 years, you'll have written 4 books, really, because I have a devotional companion that just came out to the book.
Mhm.
So you've written 4 books. You'll be part of a successful podcast. You'll speak around the country. I just said, you're crazy. That's not me. But
Mhm.
God said, that is you. And for everybody listening, God has something else for you. He has another name. Like I can call myself an author. It makes no sense that I can even say that. But because I was bold enough to step out and do what God was calling me to do, now I have this whole other life. And that's what the empty nest is. It's this whole other life. It's going back to college. It's starting to step out and start a podcast. That's not an easy thing.
Mhm.
But you stepped out and now you're impacting women all over the place. And what a world-changing thing that is. And we're
Yeah.
not all going to start podcasts, but whatever it is, maybe God's saying, hey, I want you to volunteer at the Alzheimer's unit in your hospital
Mm.
because of the people you're going to impact, the families. You know what I mean? It doesn't always have, we think it has to be something big, and it really doesn't. It's all big in God's eyes if we're obeying.
Yeah.
It really comes down to obedience. You can say no if you want, but please don't.
Mhm.
Please step in and do that thing. It may seem crazy, and it usually is if it's God, but do it anyway.
Yeah, do it anyway. And do it afraid if you need to. Like you
Yeah, you
said
got
earlier.
to.
But I love how kind of that's been the theme through our conversation is like just say yes. Obedience
Yeah,
brings the blessing. It may not look like what we think, but it definitely is worth it to say yes to God and, to encourage others in their walk. And like you said, we don't have to start something. We can become part of something already happening. And
exactly.
you just never know. Or like in your case, going back to the theater, you never even realized that you were going to step into the lead role in that. But it was all part of God's plan and how he worked all of that in your past. And so that's really cool. I love that story so much. And so, this book is great. I love how you remind us that mom is not our only name. And that can also go for any other role that we try to just tie our entire identity into. Because then but we're still, moms after they leave the nest, but it's in a different capacity. And so reminding women, like you just said, I can call myself an author. He kind of, he names us, but then he can rename us in different ways that we never would even fathom. Like, he does that exceedingly abundantly above.
He does. He really does.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, I love this, Kate. This has been so encouraging. I'm so glad we got to finally do this. And I really enjoyed talking to you, too, because we really only met in person, I think, once. It was at a conference, and I think we just passed each other at the food table or something. I want to say it was like one of the Spark conferences or something. And
probably, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just, you get so busy, you don't get to really talk with people. So I really love this opportunity to chat with you and to hear a lot of the wisdom that God has given you to share. And I would love if you would share how the listener can connect with you and resources that you have to offer and how they can find you.
Sure. Well, they can find me at katebattistelli.com. And on all social media, I'm just Kate Battistelli. So I'd love to connect with any of your listeners that, follow me, and we'll just chat, whatever. But I do have a special offer. If you'd like to read the introduction and the first chapter of the book for free, all you do is text After Party, all one word, like no spaces, to 44144, and you'll get that. And then a couple other fun goodies that we like to send out. So yeah, it's a way to at least see, is this something that I want to dive deeper into? Mm-hmm. And like I said, there's the book, and now there's the devotional companion, which is a journal. It's a 31-day devotional. So it takes you a little bit deeper into all of this with some space for writing out your own prayers and all of that. So that's fun.
Nice. And I'll have all that in the show notes so people can find you, the links and everything. And I just want to mention too, I really thought it was so precious how in the book you do an invitation to the mom, to the after party. Like, we're invited to the after party, and it's like, we don't RSVP, we don't have a choice for that.
Nope. Attendance is mandatory.
That's fantastic. So Thank you so much for being on, and I hope to have you back on again.
Thanks, Doris. I'd love to come back.
Yeah, it'd be so good. And friends, thank you so much for listening today. I know what Kate shared really encouraged you. And if you could share this episode, I would love it so much. And I hope you'll join me next time when I talk with another woman who's taking action, where her passion, compassion, and conviction intersect. Until then, friends, have a blessed week, and I'll talk to you soon.